Joy Ma Kamakhya, Joy Bhairav Baba, Joy Mai Tara.
Mama Kamakya, Jai Bhairava Baba, Jai Matara.
Thank you, sir, for joining us today. I would like to ask you about the upcoming Ambubachi festival. What is its significance and anything that you would like to say, sir?
Ambuvachi is basically in the um, temple of Ma Kamakya. There are 4 days in this month specifically, from 22nd to 26th, uh, when the temple remains closed because the water in the Garbhagriha turns reddish, and then it's believed that the deity itself is in the Rajaswala condition, so the temple is kept closed. Um, and during that, after the Ambubachi, and there's a lot of gathering of people that happen there at that time. Uh, End of the Ambubachi period, when the temple reopens, then there are certain cloths that are kept there, which are soaked in that specific water of the Garbhagriha, and those are distributed to people as Raktavastra of Ma Kamakhya. Extremely potent and powerful and very holy. So Ambubachi is this very interesting and very strange and powerful natural phenomenon that happens in the Kamakhya temple. In olden times, it was so revered. More now, it is by revered I mean literally revered. That many temples in eastern India, including some temples even as far as Varanasi as well, specifically Devi temples, used to keep their doors open closed during those 4 days. So there is nobody, no darshan is allowed for ordinary people, or the vigrahas are kept covered during those 4 days, because this is considered to be a phase of regeneration of the power, a phase that a transformation is open happening to the deity. And because Mahakamakya is so extremely powerful a form, so intricately linked to all Devi forms, and specifically in the geography of the Eastern India, there is Kamakya is like a devata for anybody born in Eastern India who is unaware of his Kula Devata and he is a Shakta disposition, can consider Kamakya as his or her Kula Devi and worship, and within few years you will see results of that definitely in the family. It's extremely unimaginable amount of power resides there. Nobody has a clue, frankly. Not even the pandas, not the people who reside there, not the people who stay far. She's of a different dimension altogether. So Ambubachi is this 4 days festival that happens. During that time, people gather from all over the land, specifically people who do Shakti Upasana and Augur Upasanas and all that. More than that, there are sampradayas of Nagas, Darshanami sadhus, people coming from various parts of India, temples. They send their representatives during that 4 5 days. The whole hill is covered with people. There's not even space to stand. Uh, and it is a interesting experience, no doubt about it, and it can be an overwhelming experience for people who go there for the first time. uh, but there are certain things to be understood in terms of Ambubachi, that there is a lot of myth surrounding Ambubachi also. Uh, Myth in the sense that some very mystical and special power is awakening in Ambubachi. It's not like that. Ambubachi, in the very traditional sense, the temple is closed at that time, so you cannot have darshan of Mahakamakya. Nobody is allowed to have darshan. So what people do is they gather around in that hill. Uh, in in previous eras, previous decades ago, or maybe centuries earlier, there are two specific things about the Kamakya hill. If you look at very old texts, and I've read certain books in Bengali to mention about what used to happen in Kamakya in early 1900s and other places. It was not a place for the casual visitor. It was told that you do not visit Kamakya just like that, and if you do, you finish your puja and you come back. You don't loiter around in that space, because not only are is Ma Kamakya there, there are yoginis, there are bhairavas, there are various other ganas, apsaras, yakshinis, every kind of being is there on the hill, somewhere or the other. May or may not be visible, or may or may not be known to the people also. That is the beauty of it. and they have their own ways of worshipping Ma Kamakhya. It's like the mandala of Kamakhya. They surround her completely, and they stay there, and it is their space that you're going. So you have to be very mindful of that. It's not yours. You don't own that space. It's their house you are visiting. So you have to be cautious and careful about that. Number two, when the period of Rajaswala condition happens, when the Ambubachi festival happens, there is a very strange, powerful transformation. It's like it's not a death. Death can give a wrong significance to the word, but it's like a change that is happening in the deity itself, as it happens in a human being also. And that is the period when traditional wisdom says that you do not start anything new. You do not do any kind of very dramatic upasanas or things like that. The common advice, and something that even older women earlier used to follow, and men and women, in fact, those who were of the Shakta disposition. And so during the 4 days of the Ambubachi, in many homes in eastern India, they would have a very light kind of food. Some may even not step on the floor, or some may sleep on the floor, or many various restrictions are followed. No puja part is done on that day, which is of a new kind. I mean, basically, it's to be understood that you do not start a sankalpa during Ambubachi. You do not do any specific pujas. Kamya pujas are not done during Ambubachi. What your Nitya Upasana is, that you can continue. So even during Ambubachi also, at least in the morning, at one point, the priest will come and do a Nitya Upasana of Mahakamakhya and go. Others cannot have darshan of Mahakamakhya. Okay, and so the Nitya Upasaka of the sadhak, specifically somebody has been doing for a few years, does not stop. But he or she should consider this period as a kind of what is called the period of Ashauja. Basically, when there is a death, when there is a birth, or when there is a, during these monthly cycles of women. So this phase, you are not to start a new sadhana. You cannot start new mantras. You cannot do fire rituals. That is the traditional idea. Fire is not to be lit in these 4 days for people who have a strong contact to Ma Kamakhya. This is the way it is traditionally done. And there is a good reason for it. Why? Because the energy at that time is very volatile, of a different nature, and is not suitable for the normal dharma that people follow. It's not suitable for the Logika dharma. The average, Tantra has categorizations of acharams. Acharam is the mode of, the attitude of practice. So, in that, the common acharam, the Vedic acharam that it mentions, which is for everybody in a way, in that the you do the normal pujas and you do not worship at night, and there are certain other restrictions in terms of brahmacharya. Importance of all that is there. So, in that acharam, which is supposed to be the largest possible manner of upasana in this land, which is accurately so, because most of our dharma is derived from the Vedas, if not directly, at least indirectly through the route of the Puranas or the Smritis and other things. You are not to do any kind of extravagant spiritual practice in those 4 times, 4 days. You are just to continue with what you have done. Very frugal life you lead. You don't do, definitely not fire rituals. These were the traditional rules that are followed during Ambubachi. So why would people gather there? Two things. One is, of course, it is a place of meeting, of celebration of this tremendous natural insignia, sign, nimitta of the goddess. It's a very natural nimitta of the goddess. Nobody caused it to happen, but it happens. So it is because Mahamaya is situated in that space. So anybody who loves Shakti Upasana, loves the Divine Mother, the goddess, unhindered way, without restrictions, they always celebrate this festival. But also because once after the 4 days, when the Ambubachi is over and people are allowed to enter into the Garbhagriha, so then there is a renewed power in the Garbhagriha. There is a tremendous, there is like a, it's like a, a moment when she resides back into her own space, and then she comes out, and that energy in the Garbhagriha is very different, very powerful. So that is why people used to gather there, so that they can have darshan on that day, and also, if possible, get the Raktavastra. These days, to Raktavastra is much easier to get. Any Panda will give you that. It's not a big deal. But whether people know what to do with it is another matter. But this was the whole idea why people used to come there, gather together, and wait for 4 days for the temple to open so that they can have darshan. Eventually, it spread out into more like a gathering and meeting space for people with different Shakta and Aghora orientations to be there in that space. But yes, the original idea was that for normal upasana, normal tantra upasana also, during those 4 days, you do not do any kind of kamya prayogs, you do not do any kind of desire fulfillment sadhanas, you do not do any kind of new sadhanas, new sankalpas. You just carry on with what you have been doing without experimenting too much. Uh, these days, though, there are everything happens. I mean, I've been to Ambubachi at least 3 times before, and I remember when I first went, that was much different. The crowd was lesser. There was a more, more organic power, or the way it used to happen. In fact, it's very different now. It's too much of arrangements, and plus the crowds have increased. Half of them have no idea why they have come there. It's more of they've seen some video and things like that and just landed up there, and then been told that it's a very powerful yoga. It is a powerful time, but only if you're doing a lot of sadhana. If you're doing nothing, then it's just a time to come and take selfies or things like that. Whatever is good for whom, so ever. But and sorry, let me, yeah, and uh, the other thing is, I have last time when I had gone there, I had seen there are people doing homas and all that. So this is a completely new idea that I don't think they have any clue or what they're doing and why they're doing. The traditional idea is that during uh, even during the phase of menstruation, fire rituals, what happens in a woman's body during that time is that the apan vayu becomes very active. Apan vayu of the five major vayus, and this has a counter reaction when a fire ritual is done. So when a fire ritual is done, there are certain things to be checked for the success of the ritual. Uh, Therefore, more importantly, it has a certain kind of conflict with that. That is why it is avoided. Unless there are some very rare kind of very vikat prayogas which is not normal at all and not meant for any normal individual to be done. Those can be done, but those are not in the normal domain. As I said, those are not for grihasthas, those are not for people with the average understanding of what is shakti and various sadhanas they do. Very fringe and very rare, but that's the thing. So during Ambubachi, those who have a contact, genuine connection to Ma Kamakhya, you carry on your sadhanas. Don't take a sankalpa. Don't do homas.
Okay. You answer my questions before I even ask them, so. But so I would also like to ask about, I'm really fascinated by the Rakta Vastra. So generally in day-to-day life, we consider menstruation, it's considered to be something, people get repulsed by it. Like the idea of menstrual blood will repulse an ordinary person. But here we celebrate Ma Kamakhya's menstruation, and then we consider the Rakta Bastra to be very powerful, which is basically a blood-soaked cloth from her womb.
Right.
So, would you like to say something about that? How does it have that power? And
So there are two things to be understood there. In the normal, as I just mentioned, in the normal course of Upasana, the period of menstruation is called Ashocha. That is the time when you are not supposed to do any of the activities of normal dharma. And there is a good reason for it. The normal sadhana paddhat is, whenever it happens, it has a counter reaction to the individual if they are doing too much of sadhana during menstruation. Okay, it can have in terms of, even if psychologically what it happens is that as I mentioned, the apan vayu is more active. Whereas if you're doing a lot of mantra japa, very severe mantra japa, again, it's not going to happen on day one. But if you carry on doing this for 6 months and very intense sadhanas on those days, so it is going to cause a conflict in the body. It is going to cause various kinds of hormonal and other issues very likely to happen. So, keeping these in mind, the idea used to be that during menstruation, you do not engage in any kind of heavy spiritual activity, primarily because when you're doing japa, your prana vayu is going to get activated. There's an uplift of the subtle body that happens. Whereas the current condition of the mind and body is that the apan vayu is more activated. So there's going to be automatically a conflict whether one consciously recognizes it or not. And over time, it increases the chance of various kinds of diseases or other things or health issues basically. So that is one of the primary reasons it was said that you do not do any kind of strenuous spiritual practices during that time. There are exceptions to this. Exception is if a woman has tantra diksha, then proper tantra diksha, then it is mandatory that regardless of any kind of ashocha, death, birth, periods, nothing matters. You will still have to worship the Ishta Devata. Okay, nothing actually matters at that time. Or anybody who has been worshipping for a long period of time, any woman, they may continue the basic upasana of the deity. Again, basic upasana. You don't take a sankalpa during that time. You don't do anything dramatic at that time. So you just do your nitya upasana. So which is what I just mentioned is happening in the case of Kamakhya also. So people are gathering in Kamakhya. Why are they gathering? As I mentioned, the original idea of gathering was so that when the temple opens, they can have a darshan. So that is how the gathering started. From there, people get collected together. You get to meet. Those days, it was not mobile internet and all that was not there. So you get to meet upasakas from different places, different forms of the Divine Mother. Somebody may be worshipping Kali. Somebody may be worshipping, Chandi. Somebody may be worshipping Kamakhya or other things, etc. So all of them get together. You can exchange notes. It's like a meeting point as you wait for the temple to open and have darshan of the Divine Mother. So in those 4 days, you are actually not having darshan. No one is allowed to have darshan. So basically, you are not. None of the pujas happen during the temple in these 4 days. So it is a reflection of what in the normal dharma we tell that for a woman who is having a periods that you do not do anything kind of strong spiritual practice. That is exactly what is being replicated here. There's no difference in there. However, Kamakhya is a deity as a form, as the mother, and this is not just from the texts, but this is from the experience as you go deeper into her sadhana. If she allows you, she is not like any other deities. She has her own ways of allowing or disallowing somebody. You realize that she is a deity of hardcore Vamachara. That is her, that is what she really, really likes. If you can worship through Dakshinachara, but that is a secondary method. Okay, you'll have to put in more efforts. Whereas in Vamachara, she is absolutely thrilled because that is her real path. In Vamachara, there are certain paddhatis of sadhana of Kamakhya which may not be the formal paddhati by the way. Formal means there is one which is in way in which the priests may be worshipping, but there are many other ways of worshipping Ma Kamakhya, and it's not just one. She reveals to different people where the offering of uh, the blood from uh, you know periods is also a part of the process, and these are, as I said, these are very offbeat and things that should never be tried by ordinary people because it has its own consequences, very strong. But yes, there are methods of that. So this raktavastra basically that we have, if you think about it, one point, that it is basically a cloth that is kept in a womb during the time when there is a period of regeneration during the Ashoja, and that has such terrific power because it is a symbol of recreation. It is a symbol that here is a deity who is showing by her natural exuberance and potency that I am replicating a phenomenon that also happens inside a human body. Okay, that she is replicating, and she's showing that this is a symbol of her creative power. Using that cloth, if you remove, so most people when they take that cloth, they do not think in these terms. In fact, people when they visit Kamakhya, they do not even think that they're entering into the womb and what they're touching is actually a yoni. The Kamakhya is supposed to be a naturally formed yoni. Okay, so people who have various mental restrictions, blocks, or other kinds of moralistic ideas would be shocked out of their mind if they think about it this way. But the texts are very clear. There is no ambiguity on this, and this was there from last 2000, 3000 years, perhaps even before the texts came into existence. So, this cloth therefore becomes a piece of soaked in the energy of the Divine Mother. It is a very, very creative, it's a magical thing if you know how to what to do with it. And there are some texts that mention that certain kinds of amulets that are created by that cloth and worn produces mantra siddhi even faster than it would normally happen in the case one is not wearing that. Okay, so various things. If a protective amulet is being created, if a ritual is being created, and by the way, it is not just for Kamakhya. I've seen that the effect of the cloth is so powerful that any deity worship it can just, it's like a booster thing. The moment that cloth is added in a specific manner with certain mantras into a certain mandala or a space where a deity is invoked, and must be very clearly the person doing it must have deep reverence for Mahakamaka. If your reverence is not there, nothing of this will work. In fact, it can turn out counterproductive too. So, with that kind of mindset, that kind of bhakti, that kind of deep faith with certain mantras, when the cloth is used, it accelerates any mantra of any deity. Whatever would have taken maybe a few lakhs of japa can be done in a phase of 50, 60,000 japa also. What could have taken days of sadhana could happen in a span of few hours also. That is the power of that cloth. Anything it can be used. It's like a booster. Whether you are making a kavacham for somebody for protective purposes, whether something requires. So tantra is, two aspects of tantra are very clear in the texts. One is the transcendental, the adhyatmic aspect where you want to come close to the deity. But equally, the prayoga is as important because there is no tantric texts that does not talk about prayogas from the mantras that are to be done. It is mentioned specifically because the path of the mother is like this. Once you go deeper, you also attain to some degree of the Shakti as it plays around to you, it will cause certain changes. And as these changes are there, you are not to run away from them, not to crave them, but to understand them for what they truly are. Power is what power does. If you have power and if there's no manifestation of the power, then it's just verbal jugglery. It means nothing. So that is where Shakti Upasana differs from other paths. In order to manifest that, in order to show that, in order to see the results of it around you, therefore there are innumerable prayogas and the shatakarmas that are there in Tantra, which is the base of all of these things. So if peace has to be brought to a certain house, there are certain homas, pujas, various things that can be done. That's also part of the shatakarma, shanti karma. But that also, if you use the Rakta Vastra in a certain specific manner, you'll see the results are very quick and very tremendous. Other end of the Shatakarma. Suppose somebody is doing a negative kind of prayoga or some other, whatever the reason is, say Uchchatan is being done. Even there, that Raktavastra is added into the puja, it just accelerates the power of the results much more. Provided, of course, the person who is doing it has the know how of how to do these things. So that is why this Raktavastra is one of the most magical things that is there. A lot of people just keep it with them. As I mentioned, if you don't know, if you don't need to go into so much complexity. If you don't know anything, you can just keep it in your puja space and every day, show agarbatti and diya and consider that to be a symbol of Ma Kamakhya and worship. Some blessings will definitely come.
It's wonderful to know, sir. And I think I've personally also experienced the power that the Raktvastra carries. Moving on to, would you have some general guidelines for female upasakas when they are on their period, since we cannot do our normal Nitya Upasana, the reasons for which you already explained? What are the general guidelines to follow?
Yeah, so these guidelines I've mentioned in other places also, but I'll repeat them once again. In my view, there are two things. One is somebody who's just starting the sadhana. For them, it is good to avoid doing mantra japa as far as possible during periods. It's just at the new stage of sadhana. Because remember that the normal course of mantra sadhana will have a reaction. It is definitely going to happen because the apana vayu is more powerful, and whereas the mantra has its own shakti and it's going to try to pull your subtle body, sukshma sharir, upwards, and this too is going to cause a conflict, normal course. However, if a woman has Tantra Diksha or has been doing sadhana for 3 to 4 years of a deity, so there is a contact that has been created in the mind, right? So if you suddenly stop your japa for 4 days, that itself will also cause a negative reaction. So in that case, because you are breaking the rhythm, right? So in that case, my advice would be that you create a separate set of malas that you keep. On during those 4 days, use those malas to do japa. Do not sit in the puja space and doing, if there are vigrahas of deities or if there is shaligram or anything like that, do not sit near those and do sadhana. You can sit anywhere else. So remember, these the period of the periods, in fact the menses when they happen in a woman, that itself is like it's in Jyotish term, that is like the activation of the eighth house. So whatever happens in the eighth house is not inside your conscious control. It is not going to be, it cannot be governed by normal dharma. It has its own way of functioning, and a very organic and intuitive understanding is required for this in order to correctly navigate this. It can be very powerful, both in the positive and the negative sense. So, ideally, what people, women should do who have been doing sadhana for long, use a different mala, do minimum amount of japa of the deity, okay, and sit somewhere else, not in the puja room, anywhere else, sit in a very relaxed manner, do minimum japa of the deity, and carry on. Don't bother much about anything else. And that mala, once the period's over, should again be kept, separately, and nobody else should touch that mala. It's to be used only once a month. And remember that during those 4 days, do not start a new sadhana. Do not do fire rituals. These two are important.
Okay. What about Anushthan, sir? How are the rules there? Because when
Very
we
good.
want to.
Same it follows. So first thing is that if you're doing a 40-day sadhana, then you have to make it 44 days. So the japa done during the periods is not to be counted. However, you do not stop your japa also. If you have been, if you're an upasika who has been doing sadhana for 2 3 years, so there is already a strong mental contact with the deity. So you cannot just stop japa just like that. So what you do is you use the different mala, you sit in a different space, you do your minimum japa, but that is not counted into the count of the anushthan that is being done. Okay. So this way, what you do is eventually you end up, say you have taken a sankalpa for 44 days, when practically you will end up doing 40 days, practically you will end up doing 4 more days, 44 days. Okay. The japa that you did on those 4 days is not to be counted. But you do not stop the japa also, because then it balances, your energy is correctly aligned to the deity. At the same time, you are also following the rules of the anushthan that is to be done.
Right. Okay, got it. What about collective sadhanas when we gather and do japa and chants
So,
together?
yes, so
What are the.
during the time of collective sadhana that we have started through Kamakhya Bhairava Upasaka Foundation once a month. So, since this is a once a month affair and there are very relaxed rules, it is perfectly all right for people, for women, even in their periods, to come and do the sadhana, provided they are physically comfortable doing it. So it should not be, you should not force yourself into doing it. If, I mean, it's for the individual to take a call. If you feel like resting and not to do, go ahead, don't do, no issues. If you feel that it's fine, I don't feel any difference, I can go ahead and do the japa, then do the japa. It is for a 1 day period, that is why it is okay. Had it been consistently every time, then it is problematic.
Okay. And for the Vishesh sadhanas, we follow the Nityopasana rules, which is we
Yes,
do not
correct.
do the Vishesh sadhana during periods.
Yes. So again, remember this. The key point of conflict comes in here is that if a woman has been doing sadhana for a few years, then automatically she has developed a contact with the deity. So then, if you ask her that 4 days don't do anything, it is going to have its own counter reaction. So we want to avoid that. So she has to do her japas, but not in the puja room, some other space with a different mala, only to be used on those 4 days. And that count need not be taken within the whole count of the sadhana that is being done. That's all.
Okay, all right. Do you have any closing remarks, sir? Otherwise, we can close this segment.
No, nothing else except that those who are going to Ambubachi for the first time, those who are planning to go, all the best. There'll be a lot of people, a lot of crowds. Have deep reverence and perhaps not experiment too much. That is not the time to experiment. Ambubachi is uh, it's good in a way that accessibility today is very easy, so people can go to places, the powerful kshetras like Kamakhya. It's a different matter that large section of them actually do not have a concrete understanding of what the space is, what is the requirement for this. It's more of a very happy-go-lucky, kind of sentimentalism. Oh, I'm just going there, and it's very wonderful. So many people are gathered. Yeah, wonderful. But unless progress in sadhana is subject to a correct discrimination and understanding of what you are doing, why you are going. Once you understand that, once your mind becomes aligned to nature, to the tithi, to the day, to the deity, etc., your every action will be meaningful. A lot of the actions that we do, whether we do in small spaces or whether going to Ambubachi, is actually more like a very superficial action. We haven't thought about it. We don't even know what it means going there. Why are we going there? What is it that you will gain there that you cannot gain in other days? So these are questions you have to ask, not to discourage you. It's wonderful if you like to see a mela of great sadhus and all that, and it's a fantastic place. It has a vital energy, no doubt. But yeah, it's important to understand what are the restrictions of that space, why it is this way, and then only you can progress higher into a sadhana.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Jai Ma Kamakhya.